folks. Happy Monday. My name's Ted. I am working on a double-decker roguelike deck builder that is endlessly replayable. It is called Rogue Deck Builder. Let me show you what I'm working on right now. So, this is, there have been a number of different changes since the last time I was working on this, since the last stream. And that's, I think, because I had a day, I think on Friday I had a doctor's appointment. So I had to do that instead of this. You'll notice that there's a few changes going on here. So one thing, you see these little cards here. Hopefully I can get this right, but basically these are card pickups in the game. And so what is that? Actually, 1 second, I just want to make sure that I actually have my, hello, okay, yeah, I do have, the stream is working. I took it so that the card select screen does not happen, or I made it so that the card select screen doesn't appear after every encounter with the enemy, right? So what's different now is I have to build my deck kind of outwards towards these cards. And then when I pick up the cards, right, I can, if I build my deck towards the, I'll just show you. If I build my deck towards the cards, for example, right, like this, and right now I've basically enabled zero cost mode. So I'm in cost free mode where it doesn't cost me to build anything. And I can place a deck panel down. And now I can walk to the card, right? And now on a better designed game with, you know, more kind of interactive tutorial, that kind of thing, I can now pick up the card with the E button, okay? And now I can choose the card to add to my deck. So maybe I would pick this Fire Rate Height Turret. And now that's a thing that I can build. So I changed it from, and actually this is something that I kind of recognized as perhaps a unique design element that I wanted to have in this game. In a lot of roguelike deck builders, right? The way that you have different events happen to you or different sorts of things, like in Peglin or Inscription or many other roguelike deck builders, you have this kind of like tree that you walk down after every encounter. So maybe I start at the top and then I kind of walk down this tree and I sort of choose like, you know, do I want to have an encounter with an enemy, or do I want to have, you know, maybe I pick something up, you know, a treasure chest or whatever. This game's a little bit different in the sense that all of that stuff is still there, but because it's also kind of like a base building game, the cool thing that I get to do in this game is I get to make it so that you have to build your deck towards those things, right? So those things are just out there in the world. They're just these bonuses that you can pick up. And then if you build your deck in the general direction of them, you'll be able to pick them up. And so what's cool about it is it's kind of this, there's always this like risk reward trade-off that you're kind of doing in your head. You're like, okay, so, you know, I could build the deck this way, right? And I could capture this, or I could take a slightly bigger risk and build it like this, right? And if I build it this way, then I can get this card, right? And so maybe I want to do that. So now I've got this stone in my deck, and then I can also pick up this card, right? So that's kind of an option. And then maybe like now that I've kind of built it up this way, I can sort of look out here and I could say, ooh, what's this random event? Maybe there's something like really important that I want to get there, right? And I can go after that. And then I can grab it. So this question, so these event things, and actually, so this is the bug that I was trying to figure out. I'm trying to like make it so that this takes you to a different screen, but it's not quite working. So essentially, that's the design. So I want to figure out why that part's not working the way I want it to. So let's see. In bonus screen. Yeah, I want to make sure, I want to see that this is actually happening. This should be happening. So I think what I want to do is like just test that I even get to this bit of code. This, I want to confirm a few things too. This is definitely inside the game's render function. Okay. This is what happens when you get the card. Select screen. Yeah. Yeah, I honestly don't know why this wouldn't. Oh, unless. No, it should. To be honest, okay, so I gotta, I guess, just see if we actually get to that place first. Yeah. So first thing, I should be seeing just some text that says like bonus, and it's not. So something's up with that. Bonus title text. I should see just the words bonus. And I don't see that. And the only way to really know, I guess I'm doing some debugging today. So we're going to look at line 1963. Anyway, that's kind of what I wanted to explain. So I'm trying to like see what happens when I get to the bonus. So hopefully we don't have any kind of crazy errors going on here today. $19.60. Okay, first I want to just check that this actually gets hit. I believe it should get hit, but that's usually what you do when you work with these things. So another thing too is I'm kind of noticing the random generation, I guess, is fine. This is like pure randomness. So there's not really much like patterning to how the randomness works. It's a little bit chaotic. But one thing I notice is, I guess it's kind of foolish to expect any particular kind of even distribution of anything, but it's just kind of interesting that, you know, how might one play this? What's like the best way to play this game, given the way some of this gets laid out? Like that one's pretty far away. I actually don't have bonuses that are all that close by. I guess that's kind of close by. I mean, the closest is this card and this stone here. And I can get those, but I'm supposed to be testing whether or not we get that. So I'm just going to, you would never be able to do this in the actual game. So, I mean, not right off the bat, but in a test mode, you can certainly do it. Just to test if you can get to that state. Okay. Yeah, and that's showing that's Okay, so then why would that not draw anything? They should draw it, right? Should just say the word bonus. Doesn't say it anywhere. So maybe we'll just see like if we have any kind of sane values here. Okay. X equals 1677, Y equals 100. That actually sounds right. What about character width? 80. Yeah, I mean, all of this seems correct. That's what's surprising to me. So why wouldn't this work? Bonus title text. Okay. I mean, that seems right. 197,210. This is all just looking at like alphabet characters. That seems right. Sort and process render commands. I mean, gosh, if that's not right, then I don't really know what is. So, return. Wow. Okay. Oh, no, wait. Okay. Well, then why wasn't the... This is actually what I wanted. Okay. Huh. Yeah. It's doing all the things it should do. But then how come if I run it... Right? Oh, so this is more favorable now. I don't know, maybe it just works and I'm like stupid. Probably. So I want to get here. I'm just dumb. I don't know what happened. That's odd. Okay, but it works now. So you can see that. All right, actually, I'll bring it back up. You can see that this this is yet another kind of a, oh wow, and look, like if I was playing this seriously, yikes, this is kind of a bad roll. I mean, and it's, what's crazy about it is like it actually, it just, you could roll this and you could just get kind of stuck with this bad roll, and then that's that. That's kind of the downside of like basically any kind of random number generation type game. And you know, there's ways that you can always kind of massage these random number generator type games into providing something at least like a reasonable start. I know Factorio has this problem quite a lot where, like, so I would just categorize it, I would just say this is like kind of a bad start because I don't really get many resources early on. And now maybe that's okay because like maybe one of these like random like, you know, one of the, maybe these bonus resources like could give you just enough resources to kind of tide you over while you eventually expand towards one of these. But I don't have a good one of these like really close at all. I've just got to like, I've got to build my deck pretty far out to get one of those. And so then, you know, that kind of, that's interesting. Um, makes me think that there should maybe be some cards that can offset the lack of resources early on or something like that. So maybe if I got one of these cards and it would like have a building option that lets makes it easier for me to do that. Another thing too that I really haven't done is um, maybe my hierarchy for excuse me maybe my hierarchy for world generation is not properly ordered, which is to say that perhaps the first thing that it should generate is these stones, right? Like crucial resources, right? And those need to be spread out at a certain amount of distance that is acceptable, right? And then there's all this other kind of world generation that is sort of subordinate to that. Um, I would say that cards are subordinate, and also these like random bonuses are subordinate. Um, if we're thinking about this, it's kind of like yeah, and actually it wouldn't be too difficult to do that because one of the rules, of course, with this kind of world generation, really, it seems stupid that I even have to say that it's a rule, but I should state what all the rules are just so that it's kind of obvious, right? One of the rules is these things can't occupy the same tile, right? So I can't generate a world where this stone and then this, random event and this card are all sitting on top of the same tile. That's kind of incoherent, right? We obviously don't want that. That's like not a real solution. Um, Given that that's not a valid option, we then have to, we then recognize that there must at least be some rule whereby um, if so, when you're generating the world, you check to see what's on the tile where you're considering placing the thing, right? So I'm like gonna randomly generate this world. Let's say that the first thing that I'm deciding to put down is the stone resource, right? This thing that I have to capture and then accumulate. It's the first thing I'm deciding to put down. Um, if there's nothing else on the map when I put that down, then there really ought to not be a problem at all, right? Because the only other thing that could be on that same tile is another rock, right? So maybe on the first pass, I'm just like, put rocks down. The only rule or the only heuristic that I want to have is that there can be no that they can't be too close together, right? What I don't want to have are these like big clumps where like there's four stones here or there's maybe I do want that. Maybe I do. I'm not 100% sure, but I probably don't. I think for this kind of game, I probably don't. World generation in a different kind of game, like say Factorio, is different, right? It's a different genre. In Factorio, they have big, actually you do want all the patches of resources to be close to each other. So, you want all the like little bits of coal to be kind of clumped together in one patch. And you want the little bits of iron to be all clumped together in another patch, right? But this is different because resources they're like a more discrete kind of quantity, right? So these big iron stones, there's really only one per tile. And then if they're too close to each other, it kind of wouldn't encourage you to expand the deck that much. Like imagine if I had like four of them here, right? Then I would just be like, oh sweet, my deck is done. Like I don't have to, I just expand it to like over to this big clump of them, and now I've got four. It wouldn't really encourage a play style where you have to expand further out, right? So with that being the case, um, with that being the case, I then have to think about, okay, well, they should be spread out. So what's the rule? How do they get spread out? But more importantly, I think I can solve this world generation problem, at least for now, fairly quickly by simply changing the order in which things get generated. Because I think what this is doing is it's actually, and you'll be able to sort of see it in the world generation. You'll see that these question marks and these cards, they're a little bit more evenly spaced out, maybe even perhaps a little bit more abundant than these stones. And I think that's because they're getting generated like last. That's a possibility. So I actually want to go take a quick look at that. I have just like one function that I call. And as this game goes on and as it gets more and more built out, of course the world generation is going to get more and more sophisticated. I don't think I've even really like touched on the surface of how sophisticated it could be. Okay. Yeah, and you see, so this is I just call one function, and it's the same parameters, and basically all I do is like I pass what kind of entity type, and the order in which I call these matters. So if I call it for entity type rock last, then that's like the last thing that's going to get generated, which is kind of what I don't want, right? So I think these need to be called in the order of their essentialness. So I would say that resources are first, card pickups are second, and then random events are just kind of, they're like a little bit of spice that we're adding to the world, just a little bit of like, we put that on there and people can go and look at that and they're like, ooh, that's interesting. And of course, then there's going to be other types of things later on. I think that the game will have slightly more advanced resources further out from the starting point, right? So what I want is at the beginning, you're just getting like your basic resources. And then like maybe mid-game, there's like slightly more advanced resources that you could go after, and they're just a little bit further out. And you can imagine if the game also incorporated some kind of like water biome. Maybe there's resources that you can only get if you're out in the water, right? So maybe if there's like certain biomes, then there's like certain kinds of resources that are only available there. So you're encouraged to expand there to get that resource and therefore get the benefit. All, possible things. But at the very least, I think just getting this ordering correct is going to be important. So I'm going to try this out. See if that improves it. Yeah, that definitely do you see how that immediately the feeling of that just changed like that, right? Now it really feels like I am almost guaranteed to get some kind of stone resource. And actually it feels a little bit like stones might be too abundant, but that's okay. Yeah, because now I can get like 2 of them really, really quickly here. I guess that's okay. I might even change some more of this random generation logic. But you can imagine now that, because right now, it's not too bad actually. The stones are a little bit more abundant than I would like, but it's acceptable. Cards are still reasonably close by. Like a triad like this would actually be really good to get early game. So I would be very encouraged to just expand the deck this way, right? You can imagine I could just do something like this where I go like that, right? And maybe what I do is I take a risk early on. This would be kind of hard to defend actually. So I'm not totally convinced, but you can imagine something like this, right? Like now I can get my card. Ooh, and I get this kind of like fire rate height turret. Okay, maybe I want that. And then you can imagine that I get this thing here. I get this bonus event, and I've also got a stone in my inventory. So that's something to consider. Like, so maybe I want that. I actually want to play around with this random generation because so I'm thinking, okay, like what's actually going to be more entertaining for the stream? Like, I could go and make the bonus screen work, and that's great, but like, you kind of get the idea of what that's going to be. So it's not super interesting. But actually, maybe playing around with a random generation would be better because you might be able to start to see how we can fine tune this kind of a thing, right? So one thing that I've noticed, I have this function, right? So randomly generate resources or bonuses. So this is basically all the world generation does this, right? And I kind of picked an arbitrary number of things to generate, and it seems to work. I said, let's just generate like 20 different things, okay? And then for each thing that we make, so first thing, let's assume that this is a valid placement unless we discover otherwise. So that's kind of the logic there. And then, pick a random X position and a random Y position. And then this logic is essentially, if you've not seen the modulus operator, it basically means like the remainder of. So what this is saying is we don't allow any kind of even positions. There's no even X positions or even Y positions. Everything has to be odd. So resources, buildings, basically the rule in this game is they all have to be odd tile spaces. And that's because there's always a space between each post hole. So post holes can go on an even tile space. That's basically the rule. And then joists or anything kind of connecting between those go on odd spaces. So, but actually, no, wait, they go on even, it kind of depends. Because some of them are even, some of them are odd. But yeah, it's actually kind of like a bit of a chart. So like if it's like even on the X and even on the Y, then it's pretty much guaranteed to be a post hole. If it's odd on the X and odd on the Y, then it's pretty much guaranteed to be a building location, right? Something where there's either a card pickup or a turret or a resource or something that you incorporate into the deck. Those are on those odd positions. So that's kind of how that works. So this will just adjust any kind of position that's generated to be on an odd space. And then, if for whatever reason I accidentally screwed up and like we just made it go off the map, then it's not a valid position. So that's the other option. This kind of depends on the type that you pass in. So if you're passing in, although actually, that's right, yeah. If you're passing in a resource, then any of the other stuff that could be on that tile is not valid. But one thing that I think we could pass in is sort of this like search area size. So that could be a parameter that instead of it just being hard-coded inside of this function, you could pass this in. And if you pass this in, then basically what this is doing is it's providing some kind of guarantee that the resources won't be a certain distance away from each other. They won't be like too tightly packed together. If I move this all the way down to 2, I'll just do it just as an example, just so you can see. You'll see like how close together things can get. Not necessarily, but they could be. It's like it would be allowed. See what it does. Yeah, there you go. Okay. So if I don't provide any sort of like distance kind of criterion, then it's just allowed that things can be really grouped far together. And now what's kind of interesting here is like this sort of geometry now provides, it's slightly interesting in some respects because if I were to play this, watch. Okay, aside from the fact that like you get resources for every single one of these things. Oh wait, you're supposed to collide with that. No. Why doesn't he collide with that? Oh wait. I think I know why he doesn't collide with that. Okay, that's a bug. Actually, let's restart. I'll show you. Okay. I just have to build something first. So I'll build a panel and then you'll see. Silly me. Okay. So watch. Now they should all like collide with these things. Actually, a bunch of them might end up getting stuck in it. But it changes pretty dramatically how the game gets played because now these enemies, they get funneled through the rocks, right? And so that's kind of interesting. I would say it makes it actually much easier to defend the deck because you're going to know where more of the guys are coming from, right? So you're better able to kind of filter them. You know that they're probably coming through this channel, through that channel, whatever. And so you can kind of like control that a little bit better. So if the stones are really close to each other, and obviously this collision logic is not perfect because they can kind of like walk between them. But you can imagine if you had something where there's like no space between, right? Where they had to be filtered through. And now that actually ends up becoming something that you might want to put in the game, right? So maybe something like a wall, something that filters the guys. If you could do that, actually, you could make it, you could definitely like change how the game is played in some pretty important respects. But anyway, this parameter just controls how much space there is of like a search area of like distance you're allowing between different instances of the same kind of resource. So if what I do is instead I just pass this in, I'll just call it like distance area size or something. And what I could do is I can just kind of tweak the distance between different sorts of things when I call this function. So I could make it so that some things are closer together, right? And some things are further apart. So maybe what I do is for rocks, I'm like, I want them a little further apart because they're special. Card pickups, maybe I'm like, that's an 8. Maybe the random events are like, I want a lot of them, right? Because I want to give you more of those kinds of things to sort of start off with. So what happens when we change the world generation this way? Your area size is undeclared. Okay, 178. Wrong thing. Distance area size. It's basically the size of the search area for similar things. Yeah, and this is actually closer to kind of what we want, isn't it, right? Now I would still posit that these rocks, these stones are maybe a little bit further out, but I kind of like the distribution of this, right? It's a little bit better. Um, I get a little bit annoyed that there's kind of some annoying like uniformity. Sometimes this thing just gets like, sometimes the random generator can just like generate these random things. Like it can make the world seem a bit more uniform than it should be, or than it would otherwise be. Like I doubt you'd ever. This almost looks man-made. You know, it's this thing this here. But the other stuff, because it depends on this, it looks a lot less man-made. So it's not so bad, but it's kind of interesting to me that. Um, and again, I don't really have many of these things that are like too close to the deck itself, actually. So, but that's okay. It's okay in this scenario because um, I have these other sorts of bonuses that I can get as I work my way towards this thing here. So one thing I can, so like as I'm playing, maybe what I decide is that I want to get this. I want to incorporate this resource into my deck, right? And so I start building out this way. And maybe what I decide is that this is about as far as I can reasonably defend, right? And so I'm like, okay, let's build this, right? And then now we can like claim this card. I get that. And then what I want to do is I want to grab, oh, then I'm in a prime spot because it's actually pretty easy to defend this. So I just go like this, right? And then I can build this way, right? And now I've got this deck panel here, right? And so maybe what I got here was a resource that made it a little bit easier for me to build out this section, and now I'm getting 2 of these a turn. And so that's actually pretty good. And then I can sort of expand my strategy a little bit further. So there's like a certain area that maybe seems appealing to me where I could get more of these random events, like right here, right? Like this. That seems pretty appealing, so maybe I want that. Maybe I go after that. And because I've already built out so much, I don't actually really have to spend as many resources to get there. And now I've got this section, right? So that's kind of cool. It actually seems, it's about right. It's about right. And then the thing is to just kind of play with it and then tweak it. And obviously every time you sort of like run this world generation, you're going to come up with a bunch of different results. So if I run it now, okay, so this seems less good. This seems maybe a little harder than it's not altogether terrible, but it's definitely going to be more of a difficult world to play in. And now if you're like me, you kind of enjoy that challenge, right? Like it's kind of one of the things that I like about roguelike deck builders is I like to be kind of given a hard world and sort of like, you know, make the most of it. But some people really, really do not like that. And they have a visceral negative reaction to it. Not me, but some people. But I could see, you know, how would I play this level realistically? Well, I know that I need this. So what I might do, and the thing is, I can't spend this if I don't have cards, right? That's kind of what sucks about this roll. I can't spend any of these resources unless I get the cards. So I would probably want to start working towards the cards first, right? There's not really a path where I get, you know, kind of the best of all things here. Like I don't get a card until I go here, and then that card's going to determine a heck of a lot of like what I would then do, because I'd probably be trying to build up towards whatever thing. So let's say in theory that I play this one, right? Let's try that out. What would that give me? And of course, like this reveals all these other problems in my current design. Okay, a fire rate area turret or a fire rate width turret. So I would pick one of these depending on how many resources I have. I'd probably pick this one because I already have a panel that's like this wide. right? And then what I would do is because this sort of thing requires some of this resource here, I would probably build like this, right? And then I would panel that over. And now I've got that resource. And now I'm thinking to myself, how do I get maybe a bit of a boost? And my options are not altogether great. So actually this resource is closer, right? So I would probably be doing something like this, you know, get that resource. You know, and I go after that. Now I've got 2 of these a turn. And I probably place like one of these down, you know, and it can shoot, it can sort of defend. I at some point am going to change. One of the things that's kind of starting to annoy me is the fact that I can't really walk around the structures that I have in my deck. You might have seen this. So I think I'm also going to change the collision logic here, so that I don't have to. There's a collision debug mode. Actually, here it is. So this will show you like how the game is deciding how the player collides with things, and you'll notice that the player. What I really need to do is I need to separate how the player collides with the edge of the deck versus how the player collides with things that are on the deck, because they're really 2 different things, and I think that's getting kind of confused here. So I think what I need to do is have like a separate kind of collision rectangle for the player when he's dealing with things that are on the deck versus dealing with things that are dealing with the edge of the deck. So like two different modes, and then just check for both. So run the physics for both. Run the physics for calculating going against the outside of the deck, and then also these anything that's on the deck needs to have separate. It should probably be more forgiving. It should probably be a much smaller rectangle that is tested against these things. So something that's maybe what it is it's like a little teeny tiny, like if you can see right here, there's this little square. That's Casey Muratori calls it the ground point. But you can imagine that instead, when testing against these things, I've got like just a little square here, or a much smaller square here that tests against this. So the collision system, I think, is not good, because what I want to have, actually, it's getting to the point where it's negatively affecting the gameplay in some pretty big ways. What I mean by that is, I should be able to walk behind this turret, right? It should be okay for me to like walk behind it and then access the rest of the deck. I should be able to like walk. So I've been forestalling it, because I don't like to get too, into the weeds of all these systems, but it's affecting the gameplay so much that I'm pretty darn close to having to like change that collision system, because it's not working the way that I want it to work. It's not satisfying. And it's confusing to the player, because I think most players would be like, hey, wait a second, like, why can't I, I could understand maybe why I can't move this way, but I can't really fathom why I can't move behind something like that. You know what I mean? So that should be accepted. It should be allowed. And pretty much in pretty much any other game, I'd be allowed to like walk across this way. And then it also opens up it should never be the case that me placing a building down all of a sudden makes it so that the player can't traverse the deck easily. So I'm going to have to fix that. But overall, yeah, how would I play this? That's the other thing too, is maybe if I fix the collision system with these kinds of entities on the deck, then all of a sudden it makes it more this kind of thing makes a lot more sense, right? I can actually pull this off as a strategy where I can do something like this and I can put the panel down and I could walk alongside this, collect the bonus, and then maybe, you know, open up this area. But basically what I'm saying is I need a way to like be able to walk around entities that are, or like structures or things that are on my deck. It doesn't make a ton of sense like why I can't do that, so I don't like that. Um, and the thing is, when you're evaluating um, whether or not there's certain things that you should or shouldn't, like what's the order in which you do things. I'm going to put these bonuses in. You know, I'll definitely put some bonuses in. It'll be really simple things. It'll just be based on what you already have in the game. So there'll be one that gives you like a random amount of like just stone resources, anything from like 1 to 5. And then there'll be another that gives you a random amount of like energy per turn. So maybe something like just for this turn. So maybe you get like 1 to 5 energy um, just for this turn, right? So you get like a little bit of extra energy boost that you can spend on something. And then maybe one of them also gives you some repair charges for free, right? So 1 to 5. No, not like a big bonus, right? Not like nothing that's like really huge or game changing, but maybe just enough to sort of like nudge you across that gap of um, being able to build something. So I want to play around with that. Um, and then there's a lot of things I've been thinking about for like what are the next cards, right? So let's say that we get these event systems in. That works. We're happy with that. Let's say that we have the ability to walk around the edges of stuff, like walk around the side here, walk around the side here. Maybe not necessarily walk in front, but that's okay. Maybe yes, maybe not. At the very least, like I want it to feel like the player can kind of like walk around the deck even when there's stuff on it. So that we got to have. Um, and then from there, it's like we start to get into these other kind of like more advanced topics. Like, should there be other resources in the game aside from these stones? I think yes. But then the question is, what are they? Where are they? How are they factored into the price of other stuff? Okay. Then there's other cards that I think are going to be kind of interesting or important. One of them would be a card that allows you to pick up something from like one tile and then from one place on the deck and then move it. So I could maybe move this from here to another panel somewhere, right? That would be pretty cool. What if there was a card that allows you to merge panels? It could merge this panel with this panel, and then you would just have one big long panel, right? And then, of course, if you had any cards that gave you a bonus that depended on that, then that's big, right? Another thing that this probably needs to have, you know how I've got this repair bay, right? So this repair bay gives me 1 repair per turn. But imagine that there's like a repair bay that depends on the size of the panel that it's sitting on. So one where it's like if I'm on a wide panel, then I get, so on this panel, for example, I would get 3 repairs, right? That would be pretty cool. Maybe another thing I want to have is like a UX consideration where like when you put something on a panel, it's very clear what kind of a bonus, like how much of a bonus you're getting. So maybe this would just have like a little number next to it or something like or maybe just like some little pips next to it, just something saying like, hey, you get a +3 bonus because this is sitting on a panel that's 3 wide. So that's another kind of option or another sort of like UX consideration. I guess I'm just kind of like factoring into my head, based on where this is right now, the design, what sort of order of things do I want to tackle, and you know what's kind of more important than the others. You notice how even though I have all of these different types of cards that I've considered, right? I've considered, say, so I've made this kind of matrix of like these are all the different types of turrets that we want to have in the game, right? Range, damage, fire rate, knockback, slow. These are all those cards will go in, but the thing is that I think it's not as it's hard to say what all those are going to be until you put in the rest of the systems and you can get more of a feel for how the game is. So right now it's really only got this one that's just like the fire rate, right? And that's cool. It's just you can definitely see that bonus, but then the value of the other ones becomes a lot less clear. And then what's hard to say too is like, how do these sorts of strategies like work with each other? You know what I mean? So what if I had like another card that like allows me to like build walls? So like one stone and one energy gives you one wall. Okay. And now I can start to like funnel enemies towards my deck. Well, that actually greatly changes the dynamics of how the game is played. You know, all of a sudden I've got this option to like to build walls around my deck, and I can sort of guide guys around that area. And it also implies the existence of other kinds of things. It implies the existence of it implies that I should have something to destroy the walls, right? So something to kind of like clean up at, like a recycle card, right? So I would probably want that because I don't want to be putting a bunch of walls somewhere and now I can't build where they are anymore because, you know, I put them down, right? So if I don't get the recycle card, then what do I do? Or like there should be, maybe there's always like some kind of destroy option. So maybe I always have the option to like destroy a resource to gain, you know, a certain amount, or like to recycle something. So these are all kinds of things that become apparent as you sort of work through the systems. But it's getting to be more clear to me what kind of a game this is going to be, right? It's getting to be clear to me that I want to have ways to create choke points, and then I want to have ways to sort of funnel enemies into the deck towards some of the more higher powered things like this, high fire rate, high damage. But maybe I want to put like other things in certain parts of the deck, like a range turret like this. I want to put that like in a certain special location where I'm guaranteed to kind of get some, you know, start hitting some of these really, really far off enemies. So that's like there's all these considerations. Or like maybe I've got like a choke point, right? And I put like one of the slow turrets like right next to it. You know what I mean? And as they come through, they start slowing down, and then I'm pummeling them with this. And so it's going to be obscene amounts of enemies, but then there's always a card, there's always a strategy, there's always something that you can do to maximize, you know, how you handle the situation. So that's really where I'm. It's the sort of like tiers of priority are becoming clear to me. And then there's all these other nice things too, like I want you to be able to customize the player character a lot more. So I want you to be able to improve it, like give him a different weapon loadout, right? I want you to be able to maybe make the player move faster, right? So maybe there's different like maybe you can like craft some boots that allow him to move faster. Maybe there's things you can do that give him a better fire rate range or a better fire rate. Maybe there's things you can do that protect him more. There's all these kinds of things that are options as well. So these, I think, the other sorts of things become more, it makes more sense to kind of put these in like later on in the game, kind of when it's more clear what their purpose will be. I guess that's the best way to describe it. So once I've got, say, a way of creating choke points, I'm thinking this slow thing will actually be even more important, because I know that as a strategy, I know I'm going to want to place this very close to some kind of choke point, right? Actually, of all the ones that I definitely want to do, it's this repair one, right? Because I think if there's a way to give the player more repairs, that's going to be awesome. I even want to have something that runs counter to the maulding mechanic, and I want to have a better way to kind of draw the maulding mechanic on the screen, so I'm probably going to work on that as well. And then, of course, like at the very top end, once all this stuff is in place, I want to have kind of like the highest tier thing that you can build in the game, which is like, I call this the Omni turret. But basically what it is it's a turret that absorbs the properties of all the turrets next to it, right? So I've got, this design language for like, here's what some of the cards in the game are going to be, but I think there's kind of a natural order in which they should be put in the game, and then you can kind of play it and see how it affects the strategy, see what you like about it, see what you don't like about it. That there's, it's not something that, I don't think you just go in and like put all this stuff in right away, because then it's just kind of this big mess and you're not really reflecting on why anything you've got in there is better necessarily, right? Like I might end up deciding that there's things that I don't want to even do because it's just kind of stupid, or there's no like actual strategy that's relevant to it, or maybe, I end up going with something else. So it's kind of like, there's like some games where like okay, here's an example of it. And I don't mean to bag on this game because I actually really love this game. So if you're Thomas Happ and you're watching this, like, I'm sorry, but like, I really love Axiom Verge. I think it's a great game, but I also think it's just got like a lot of weapons in it. It's kind of, and actually it's sort of like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which is sort of what it's just, that's like that's one of the canonical Metroidvanias. That game had a crap ton of weapons in it too. But there comes a point where there's like so many different weapons in it, and like where you just feel like the weapons are only in there just to have weapons in there, and it doesn't really feel like there's any like special or important or unique strategies that you're employing with the weapons. And so I kind of don't really want to go down that route of like, oh, let's put this in and let's put that in and let's put, the way I think I prefer to make games is to like build the systems first, and then the systems will tell you what sort of stuff naturally fits into that design. That's what I prefer. So if I start building more and more of these systems, it's going to be apparent to me which of these we want to tackle next. That's my thinking. So kind of a stream about design. I'd much rather talk about that than, hop into like the same kind of programming stuff. So I will stop there and see if there's any more questions. All right. Well, it's been fun. Actually, this is really useful for me because I was, I don't usually get these. The streams kind of give me an opportunity to just actually stop and reflect on what I actually want to do. And so this has been great because I've actually stopped and just, instead of just working on it, I've thought, okay, what do I really want these bonuses to be? What's the next kind of problems that really, it's actually kind of helped me plan my week. So even if nobody watched, oh wait, yeah, okay, great question. So is the end goal to just build the deck as big as possible, or is there something else like Isaac/Rogue style exits that you're looking for? Yeah, great question. So what I would say is I think it's actually going to be probably a multiple of things. I think an exit makes a lot of sense. So what I think is that imagine that there's some point that's somewhere on the map, right? That's a thing that you build towards. And sort of the joke that I had in my mind actually was like, imagine that, okay, so the storyline is just, you're this middle-aged guy and you're really disaffected with, your local city council, like your local politics in your area, which as it turns out is like a thing. There are people like this. I'm not necessarily one of them, but there are people. So the city council passes a resolution limiting the size of decks. Okay, so what if the whole point of the game is to just build your deck all the way up to the city council's building, whatever government building in your town, and then you surround that building, you know, with your deck, and you incorporate it into the deck, and then you declare like some kind of political victory or something like that. Like, you took over city, you incorporated the city council into your deck. Just so, like, it's almost like so stupid that it works. But yeah, there's a lot of roguelikes, I think, like Hades or whatever, that do have, they have an end goal, and I think I want to have that actually. I want to have it where you can actually win a run, and then we can have like stats on how you won the run, and I think I want to have it. Also, like another good thing about that is it puts a bounding box on how much to make, right? It could be very, you could see how easy it is to just like keep prototyping and keep and the game could be so and so big, however big, and maybe there will be a mode that you can play that's like that, like some kind of just sprawling, like build for as long as you can stay alive. We're going to keep throwing guys at you. I could conceive of that. But I think for the very first version of the game, in the interest of actually shipping something, I would like it to have like a goal, something where it's like, if you can't incorporate city council into your deck by turn 300, I don't know, some number, you lose, right? And what that just puts a bounding box on things. It allows me to ship. It allows me to get it out. So that's probably why I'm gonna have it have some kind of actual goal. So, any other questions? Oh, happy to do it, and I'm stoked that people are enjoying it. If you like the design stuff, I kind of think I prefer to do that more. But at any point, if people are like, "Ah, stop talking about design, would you just program something?" More than happy to do that too. So it's really your stream, to kind of for me to just talk about things, kind of answer questions or whatever. But I sort of feel like the design stuff is more entertaining. I get to talk more definitely, and if you're not super familiar with the code base, then like the code stuff can be kind of like a bit harder to follow, I guess. So anyway, thanks so much, and I'm happy that you enjoy it. I'll see you soon.